All right, today we are talking about handcuffs. Probably one of the questions that I get most on the channel is about what type of handcuffs to buy, whether hinge or chain are a good idea, what brands are best, and about the overall durability of handcuffs. So today we are going to talk about those topics. Where are you going? Get out of the way! All right, so first we're going to look at the cuffs that I use most often at work. I bought these cuffs when I started off as a security guard when I was 18 years old. These are Smith & Wesson Model 100s. They're kind of a blued, blackish finish Smith & Wesson handcuff. They're riveted together, and then the rivets are kind of ground down off the ends. You can see what they are. Now, the way Smith & Wesson handcuffs work is there's a bow here and ratcheting teeth, right? So they go around a person's wrists and clasp in. That's pretty much the way all handcuffs operate. They're all pretty similar to each other. And what makes Smith & Wesson different from a lot of other brands is the double locking mechanism. If you don't know, a double locking mechanism is what keeps the bow from collapsing in further when somebody sits into the car or when you're putting cuffs on or leading them around by the cuffs. So to double lock Smith & Wesson handcuffs, you put them on the person and then you slide a little bar over that's inside this little slot. So you can see that inside there, and then inside here there's no little bar showing anymore because I slid it over. And then to unlock them, you put your key in, you turn it one way and you hear a little click, and then you turn it the other way and the cuffs come open. Now on Smith & Wesson handcuffs, what you have is you have your double locking slots on both sides of the cuffs, but the keys to unlock the cuffs are only on one side. All right. So when you use these, you have to load them into your cuff pouch, key locks together, and into your pouch. So when you take them out, you can take them out and theoretically have them both key locks up to be able to apply to somebody. So on these, which direction the keyholes are in is important. Now this is a plus and a minus, which we're going to talk about more with other handcuffs. Having keyholes only on one side means if you put keyholes up, they're more secure than cuffs with keyholes down or with keyholes on both sides. And chain cuffs I prefer because they're easier to work with and they allow you to do more with larger or smaller people because you've got more flexibility and where these cuffs can be at while still restraining the person. That same type of cuff, the chain cuff Model 100s that Smith & Wesson makes, they also come in a nickel finish. Here's an example of that. It's the exact same handcuff. I have noticed that these tend to look better longer, but they don't necessarily last any longer. If you're going to use a pair of handcuffs at some point, they're going to break. But they do look pretty. And they're easier to find at night if you drop them on the ground. So I guess there is something to be said for that. From there, we're going to talk about hinged cuffs. Now, the advantage of hinge cuffs is they allow you a little more control over the situation. You put these on someone and there's only so much movement that they have. You can see there, it's very little lateral movement in hinged cuffs. They also have the advantage of if you put these into a pouch, let's say you're going to have them on your offside. Like for me, in order to access them with my left hand, I use my hinge cuffs, and I would have to do all the gymnastics that I do with chain cuffs in order to get them situated in my hand properly with the keyholes up, because they're not going to flip and twist around like you had with the chain cuffs. But they operate the same way, the same double lock mechanisms on both sides, but keyholes only on one side. Now there's other varieties of handcuffs that have different double lock mechanisms. There are some that have a little peg on the side that you push in to double lock, and other ones that have a little lever on the side that you slide or push up or down in order to lock with the lever, but they all operate pretty much the same way. Next we'll talk about a brand that kind of took off in the last few years. This is Asp brand handcuffs. Asp brand handcuffs have a lot of user-friendly features that can be very useful for certain purposes, but of course you always give something up when you get a little more user friendliness. With Asp handcuffs, you have double lock mechanisms just like on the Smith & Wessons, where you put the peg on your handcuff key in one side and slide over in order to get the handcuffs double locked, and they have keyholes, but they have keyholes on both sides. So you don't have to worry about which side of the cuffs is keyholes up. Now, The upshot with that is it makes it a lot easier to use. The downside with that is that they are less secure, because if a person knows anything about picking cuffs, or they're going to try to pick the cuffs, you have given them access to the keyholes no matter which side of the cuffs you put on them. Is this a real thing in real life? Is this something that happens all the time? I tend to think not, that the keyhole issue could be more important for someone in a corrections environment, or if you're going to use these for temporary detainment, you're going to handcuff someone to a wall, like we see in a booking area, or for loss prevention. That could be a real issue, that they're going to have access to those keyholes when you have to leave someone alone. But ideally, we don't want to be leaving someone alone with handcuffs on them. The other issue that I have with ASP handcuffs, and the reason that I don't use them, is that any good handcuffing instructor will tell you that you want to have the person completely in control before you apply the cuffs, right? Now, yeah, that's great in a class, but like so many law enforcement classes that are put on by the companies that make the product, and by people that sit at a desk or have sit at a desk for 15 or 20 years and are now trying to tell you how to do your job, or someone that works in the middle of nowhere that doesn't ever actually arrest people, but now is coming up with the policy on how handcuffs are going to work. That's not how it works in real life, right? I can't count the number of times that I've had to fight someone into handcuffs. And whether you're working with 5 guys or you're working alone, at some point you're going to have to wrestle someone in handcuffs. It happens to me all the time. So the issue with ASP handcuffs that I have is that if you have to fight someone into cuffs, these don't have the same lateral stability in the bow, right? So because this polymer, there's flex to it. Now, could you do that same thing with another set of handcuffs? Like, here's my really old Smith & Wesson cuffs. You couldn't. I guess you'd have to really crank on it to get it over there. These can pop out of alignment. In fact, these are kind of coming out of alignment a little bit. I'm going to have to file that down pretty soon. You get it a little bit out of alignment, but you're never going to be able to get it all the way over like that without almost breaking the handcuff. But ASP cuffs come like this from the factory. You can twist it all the way over and not be able to get it in. So that's kind of a concern with ASP cuffs. The other upshot of these is that they're a little bit lighter for what they are than your Smith & Wesson cuffs. I haven't weighed these, not really interested in weighing them. It only matters how it feels to me anyway. So for a set of hinge cuffs, the ASP cuffs are going to weigh less, and the chain cuffs are going to weigh a little less than the hinge cuffs overall for the ASP cuffs and for these, because there's less metal involved. So they're a little lighter, but they're a little bulkier. They're thicker. They don't sit in the same pouches. You have to have dedicated pouches for the ASP cuffs, or you have to get a strap. That's how Josh uses his. He actually lent me the strap with the cuffs because he knew very well I wasn't going to have the pouch to put these in. But that's ASP. It's not that I don't like ASP. It's just, for me, I would rather have the extra security and the extra ability to use these as a tool to torque people out of a car, or to get people onto the ground. We can talk about handcuffing techniques in further videos, but if your issue is weight and convenience, then ASP might be a good option for you. They also tend to be a little more expensive, so that's something to think about. If we take that to my logical conclusion of things that I would like, we're on to rigid cuffs. I borrowed these rigid cuffs from my buddy Chris, and these things are made by Hyatt. Right? I think it's Safari Land now, but same. These essentially work just like a pair of normal handcuffs, the normal Smith & Wesson or Hyatt handcuffs, the chain or the hinge, but there's a big polymer block in the middle here that is extremely solid that keeps these things from moving at all. Now, the upshot of this is to use it for a control technique, like applying it to somebody's hand and then cranking them out of the car, or applying it to somebody's wrist and then cranking them down to the ground. Those work really, really well. And for fighting people into cuffs, these things are fantastic. I mean, this gets you absolute control over the one side of the person's arm, and then a handle to drag them over and apply to the other hand. These things are great for that. The downshot to these is that they're really expensive and they're hard to fit onto your uniform. I would carry a set of these, except that I can't find a basket weave pouch for these, so the pouch wouldn't match the rest of my stuff, so I'd be out of policy for work. The guy who uses these actually puts it into a slash pocket into his vest, so a big like document pocket in his vest. He just slides these in there. Works for him. I like my stuff to be a little more secure, so I wouldn't use them in that fashion, but That's how they work. They're a little more expensive. They're a little heavier. They give you a lot more control. They're a little harder to attach to your equipment. But they work just like any other handcuffs. There's a key upside, so they're pretty secure. These are really secure because there's no way you're going to reach your hand around the cuff to get it in there with your hands in them. And this is an example of your push button double lock. You can see in there's a little peg in that hole. You push onto it to double lock the cuffs. Now everybody always talks about how durable cuffs are. And they say, is this brand more durable than that brand? What's your favorite brand? Yada, 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 yada. And here's what I tell everybody. If you use handcuffs long enough, you will end up having to cut them off of a prisoner. If you use them long enough, they're going to break. They're a mechanical device, and like all other mechanical devices, they will eventually fail. Unlike most mechanical devices, these are specifically designed to never be taken apart. So it's not like you can take it apart and easily oil it or grease it or any of that. I've got a whole video about maintaining handcuffs. I think you should look at that if you're worried about this issue. The key with buying any particular brand of cuffs is to find one that's going to work for you, is made by a reputable manufacturer. Now, right off the top of my head, Peerless, Smith & Wesson, Hyatt, all of those are pretty good to go. I haven't noticed any difference between the durability of all of them. I've had to see all of them cut off of people at one point or another, which is a whole lot easier with chain cuffs than it is with these, I can tell you that much. But at some point they're going to fail, and I want to show, because I think people get a little off kilter about whether or not something will break, and they get these ideas in their head that a certain brand or a certain type of handcuff or gun or anything is going to be just unlimited durability, that you can beat on it and do whatever you want on it. This is actually a pair of my boss's handcuffs, and we had a hell of a time getting these off a guy because the key got stuck inside, right? And we couldn't turn it, couldn't get them off. And then once we actually got the cuffs to open, see, I can't get them to open up now. Once we actually got them open and got them off the guy that he had them on, you can't get the key out of the thing. So we got lucky there. We didn't have to cut these off of them. That would have been really entertaining. But they will break. Now, all handcuffs will break. These are Smith & Wesson. These are the ones that I use. I love these things. I don't see any problem with them, but, you know, this guy's been a cop for about 25 years, so these might be 20, 25-year-old handcuffs, and eventually they're going to fail. That's why maintenance is important. But as long as you're not using just the cheapy sheet metal looking handcuffs that are from a company with absolutely no name that you've never heard of before, you're probably going to be fine. I have actually found use for the cheapy no-name handcuffs in the past. I've done videos before, like my unarmed security duty belt video, where I talked about if you're working unarmed security, and chances are you're never going to use handcuffs anyway, and when you do, the local police are going to come and pick them up. And if they're going to pick them up in the handcuffs you have, then maybe it's best to use the cheapest handcuffs you can possibly get. And nowadays, I don't really have to do that because I have zip cuffs at my disposal. But if that's an issue for you, maybe you think about having a pair of good cuffs and a pair of crap cuffs. But times have moved along, and there are techniques for changing out cuffs that are really safe. It's just you have to be the one to think about it, especially if they're your cuffs on that prisoner. I don't ever suggest letting the local PD take your cuffs to the police station unless it's some type of exigent emergency and you can't get the cuffs off of the person. But most of the time, if the cuffs are applied properly, we should be able to get them off and be able to have you keep them. So I suggest Smith & Wesson, Peerless, Hyatt, Asp. Can't think any other off the top of my head now, but they're all pretty much the same durability-wise. So that's kind of handcuffs. That's the long and the short and the everything else in between. My thoughts on the issue. If you have any other questions, concerns, or comments, put them down in the comments box down below. Give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and yada, 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 all the YouTube stuff. Till next week, you guys be safe. Take care of each other. I'd like to thank all the Patreon supporters, and especially the shift supervisor level Patreon supporters that we have listed here. Your contributions are what allows free field training to continue on and become better. Thank you.